Hello everyone. This is Indian Contract Act. This is Indian Contract Act lecture 8, in which we will continue from where we had left in our last lectures. Let's move on to the legality of the object. Coming to the topic of legality of object. So, in this particular video, we will majorly be dealing with. In this video, we are basically dealing with section 23. 23 says that about the legality of the object. So, in this concept, basically, these are five constituents. What section 25 says that it is about lawful object and consideration. To make it very easy for you, it's about that if certain object or certain consideration is basically fulfilling these requirements, it's forbidden by law, defeats law, fraudulent, immoral, or against public policy. If it's these five constituents are happening, then that particular agreement will become void. It will not become a contract, because such kind of instances where object is forbidden by law or it's defeating the purpose or consideration, this would be against the principles of the contract. Because in the contract, what we states are contract is an agreement between the parties which is based upon the on the faith and trust, and we do not want such kind of contracts in our society, in our country, in a state in which is against the public policy, or which is against the basic principles on which any sort of arrangement is made between the parties, because it will ultimately be not beneficial for the society at large. So these certain constituents are held to be, if an agreement has all of these such constituents, it would be considered to be void. To make it very let's move on to we'll understand it in with sequence wise as to what are these elements. Firstly, about forbidden by the law, what you can understand by forbidden by the law is, forbidden means basically something which is held by, explicitly by the law, that this particular thing is invalid. Firstly, it's explicitly held to be legal and it's against some statutes. To give an example about forbidden by the law, what it means forbidden by law is certain kind of object or certain kind of consideration. It is explicitly forbidden by law. To give an example, like if there is, we know that there is NDPS Act. NDPS is basically regulates narcotics, drugs, or certain sort of substances which are held to be illegal by state. All right. If A and B are doing any agreement which involves these illegal drugs, so here the object behind entering into whole agreement is in itself illegal. So it's forbidden by the law. Then this means that this whole agreement in itself is void. Or for example, if you take the example of SEBI laws, you will deal with it in your security laws classes, which you will read in your further years. But for the contracts, in the contract law, we are generally talking only about the general principles. Like if there is something like insider trading is illegal under this SEBI laws. If A and B, what is happening? A is working in certain company, and A knows that because of A is working in company X, and A know that because certain kind of act, like internal information of X, which A know, the prices of that company X on the stock exchange. You will learn it in later stages. Just to give an example to make clear, you will have some innovative examples which can be asked in your exam, or you can write those examples. um, A gives this information to B that this price of the stock is going to rise, and B buys the stocks, and because of that, what this whole arrangement is, this whole agreement between them is about insider trading, which is explicitly by the law is held to be illegal. So my purpose behind giving this example is that all such agreements which are forbidden by the law is explicitly held illegal by the law, such as like agreement to commit theft or to sell banned drugs, transfer of property in contravention of TPA Act. This is about the property transaction. If certain property transaction is explicitly held void, not proper, illegal by the TPA Act, such kind of whole agreements will be void. Just to replicate all these what we have studied here, there are certain instances like which is defeating the purpose of any law. How it is different from the first example about forbidden by the law. In the forbidden by the law, certain act is explicitly held to be, in this there is these acts were held explicitly void, explicitly illegal under certain statute. But if it is defeating the purpose of the law, defeating purpose of law, if A and B enter into any arrangement, this could be any arrangement. If you see A and B do certain agreement, which in itself is not illegal. You know, if A and B has made certain scheme between themselves, it's not against the laws, but ultimately it's just defeating certain law. Like for example, if you see A has certain amount of property, and what A do, in rather than buying that property in his own name, he buys the property in the name of B, just to evade the taxation, because A cannot show it to be his own property. B, if it's shown in the name of B and B does not have a lot of property, then the taxation principles. This you all will be dealing in your taxation principles about the property transaction. What I just meant to by this is, if A wants to transfer, if A is giving money to B to buy certain property, but on this property the right will be of A, because certain the transaction is of such a nature. But this is a benami transaction which you will deal in your mm, property law classes. But to give an example and to give a perspective on this topic, I want to state that if there is any arrangement between two parties which ultimately will defeat the purpose of the law, defeat the purpose of any law, and if that particular case goes before the court will see that the whole arrangement was to defeat certain kind of law. Ultimately, this is against the public policy, against it's causing the basic principles. This whole arrangement was in contravention of the laws. So this policy is contravention is against the laws. So this whole agreement is void. Easy, very easy. So though the activity may not be forbidden, whenever you're writing about defeat the purpose of law, you should first mention that the activity may not be forbidden, but it would ultimately nullify or evade the law's purpose. Certain statute is circumvented. So such kind of language you should write, not layman languages you should write. Like in the forbidden term, you should forbidden by law, you should state that if it's explicitly or uh, expressly held illegal under certain statute or regulation. Easy, I think all of you are able to understand. If you have any doubt with regard to this, not able to understand, you should refer back to your books to understand it in a better perspective. I've given you general understanding. If you have any doubts, you can comment me on that. About the fraudulent part, let's understand about the fraudulent. Even if you see, if any objective about the concepts of, in the fraudulent part, we're majorly discussing about deceit, misrepresentation, intentional fraud, which I've already covered in the previous lectures in a very detailed manner. If you want to gain more perspective onto as to what is fraud, how it will be differentiated from misrepresentation, you should certainly go back to those lectures. I would suggest you to watch these whole videos in a sequence form to have a better understanding of all the topics. To give an example about fraud, I want to state that if any kind of arrangement is entered between the party which is causing fraud to any third party, in such kind of contracts, like contract to falsify documents, bribe officials, or cheat in a transaction, certain such kind of whole arrangements are also arrangement or agreements are fraudulent. To give an example to you about how it works is fraudulent. If you see fraudulent, let's take about the fraudulent part. Let's understand, if A and B makes an agreement between themselves, by which how A and B are agreeing. A tells to B that okay, we will make a, they make an agreement that they will that this much, A will give this amount, B will give this amount, and they together will bribe an official. Bribe an official means they will bribe someone, like bribe some officer for their any act. And if A like agrees to give 10 lakh and B also agrees to give 10 lakhs, and if later on A denies to give 10 lakh, B cannot go to the court. One major thing a lot of students are confused about is what is meant by this whole concept of voidity. Voidity basically means that this agreement does not become enforceable. If it is not enforceable, then it is not a contract. Enforceable means if A and B, if A later on denies, A denies to fulfill its obligation. Because if in a contract, how it happens is that the party who is breaching the contract, these kind of principles will later on discuss about. There's certain time duration during which a contract is to be fulfilled, execution of the contract, resignation of the contract. If the one party is not, it's a revocation of the contract has happened, then the specific relief can be asked for. All of these are the later topics. Just to give a perspective on this topic, I want to state the fact that what is the meaning of voidness is like enforce, there is no enforceability. One, if a one party does not fulfill the obligation, then other party cannot go to the court. So what it means is the whole agreement was a nullity. That is basically means voidness. Let's move on to next part about the immorality. In the immorality part, firstly we want to state that the immorality as a concept, immorality, if you see immorality is based upon the standards of the society. Nowhere in the Indian Contract Act the word immoral is defined. So it is defined by standards of morality at the time. So it is often dictated by the court precedent, the legal customs, whatever the local customs are followed, what are the precedents given by the court. It's also important to note the fact that the principles of immorality can be different between the jurisdictions. The principles of it can be different. What I mean to say by this is, what is meaning of the fact which I stated about different standards of immoralities. Probably in one country, what is held to be moral might not be moral in another country. Probably, if you see in the jurisdiction like America, like any Western society, what can be held to not be immoral can be immoral in in the Indian jurisprudence or in the Indian cases. It's mostly decided by the court based upon the standards. So it's based upon what is the standard, so it's dictated by the court precedents. Like if you see agreement promoting or facilitating acts regarded as immoral, if you see prostitution or extramarital relations, in a lot of countries, if you see prostitution is not held to be immoral. It is considered to be a part of business kind of trade, and everyone has a right to trade, we have already discussed one, as we can see in the constitutional principles under article 19 of the Constitution of India. But still prostitution is considered to be immoral in Indian society, extramarital relations. So it's based upon the standards of the society. Probably in some other country the prostitution can be seen as not immoral. It is not immoral means it is still a stand, society accepts the prostitution. So if in the Indian legal system, if you see any contract of prostitution is still considered to be um, immoral, so the agreement is void. But ultimately also you need to understand the fact that you need to check the standards of society. Let's move on to like sexual services, cohabitation for payment. Let's move on to the next part about the public policy. So public policy, if any kind of agreement is against the public policy, here also same as immorality, public policy as a term is also not defined. But a major difference about immorality and public policy is immorality is about standards of the society, and against public policy is about the welfare of the state. Welfare of the state. So there are certain examples. If you see the examples, you will understand. So examples of against the public policy is agreement to stifle prosecution, trading with enemy states, restraint of marriage. So these certain these certain elements are under the ambit of public policy because they are deliberately kept, and these are deliberately kept broad, and it's upon the court. The court has a duty to interpret all of these. And but what happens is that in the multiple cases, like in the cases of Gerural Parekh case, it is held by the Supreme Court that if a court is declaring certain agreement to be void, then the court has to provide detailed reasoning as to why that whole agreement is not enforceable, means this whole agreement has not become a contract, and this whole agreement has turned out to be void, and has to provide a reason. You have to I'll explain you these instances about like a agreement to stifle prostitution, how it is going to affect the public policy. Agreement to stifle prosecution. Prosecution basically means if A and B, A causes injury to B. So B has a claim against B can go to court and say that A hit me. A was probably negligent in his act or something. So A hit me. B is like, give me damages. But if C, who's a third party, who's not even related to this whole prosecution, C comes to B and tells to B that I will pay you 50 lakh. I'll pay you 50 lakh rupees. 50 lakh I'll pay it to you. Don't pursue the case against A. Probably A and C has certain relation. But how this whole agreement is causing this whole agreement is against the public policy, because prosecution, B has a claim against A, so it should not be denied by certain agreement. Why it is against public policy is because probably C is rich person and B is like some poor one. So it is creating a dom influence, as we had studied in our earlier lectures where I had explained to you about the undue influence. In the undue influence, what we studied, like a dominating party is influencing the inferior party in some other way. So it is considered to be against the public policy. Such kind of any arrangement, any contract, any agreement should not be allowed in a state, a proper state. Then another is about trading with enemy states. Enemy state, if our state has held certain country, certain jurisdiction to be trading with enemy state. What it means is that if A has held, uh, not A in this example, if I take the example to give you the example about India and China. So India does not has declared China to be enemy state, but if there is certain war, and during that war, India, so India declares that China is an enemy state, and any kind of trade arrangement with the enemy state is against the public policy. So all the kind of the agreements will be considered to be void. And if a person who is of Indian citizen, who he do trading with the enemy state, should that agreement be allowed? This kind of agreement should not be allowed because it is against the public policy of India. All right, so such kind of agreements should be considered to be void. Another one about restraint of marriage. Restraint of marriage will deal in details in the next videos probably, in which I'll explain you in a very proper manner as to why restraint of marriage, what are its exceptions in a proper way. Let's move on to our speculative litigation deals, which is also called champery. Champerty is a kind of practice in which what happens is, this is not a very Indian concept, but how speculative dealing happens. This is speculative litigation deals. Speculative litigation deals. In such deals, what happens is that if B has a claim against A, means probably B can file a case against. This is an example, okay? To give you an example of what kind of speculative litigation deals. So if you want to have like understand what speculative deal as such would not be asked in your exam, but if you can, you will in a lot of books you will find this topic in which there is a speculative deals are considered to be against the public policy. And just to give an understanding how it works is like a B can file a case against A. B has a claim against A, but B does not have the means to file the case. Means B does not have the money to this is a civil dispute. So B has to hire the legal representative. B does not have the money to pay to advocate who will represent B in the court of law. But C comes into the picture. C is a third party. C is a third party. Does not have any claim. A and B. But BC tells to B that I will pay you the money to hire an advocate and pursue your case against A. C does not have anything to do with this whole case, but still comes and tells. And there are certain exceptions to this also. Like if C is a kind of NGO or a public body or some non-profit organization, as I told you, they sometimes give the money. They finance litigation because such individuals like B does not have the money to file the case. So C can give the money and B can pursue the case. But in the speculative litigation deals, how it happens is in such kind of deals, there is an agreement between B and C that that whatever amount B will receive from A, B and C probably will decide it 50-50, like 50-50% they will divide. So, but such kind of agreements, like C does not have a claim, he's a third party, he just merely helped in the legal representation. So, this is the basic thing that this is speculation. They are speculating. Speculating is like speculation is a kind of wagering. In the next video, I'll talk about what is speculation wagering. Meanwhile, just to give you an example, this is a kind of chance game. To give a very layman term, chance game, in which what is happening is that they're chancing upon the outcome of the litigation. That if A B gets certain amount of money, they will do 50-50. So this kind of speculative litigation deals is against the public policy of India. So such kind of whole agreements should not be allowed. So that is the whole concept about this public policy as I've discussed. You can read upon this case to get a better perspective on the case. Let's move on to our agreement void if consideration object unlawful in part. This is not a very important topic, but to just give you an understanding how it happens is if there is an agreement between the parties. Okay, in this kind of agreements, what happens is like there is some agreement which is made. Agreement which is made. Oh, you know what is agreement? Like there are clause one, clause two. There are a lot of clauses. But in this, only like if you just assume that there is only 2 to 3 clauses which are illegal, which is like unlawful against the law, and rest are lawful. So in this kind of contract, what happens is if you can delete all the unlawful parts, and if still the rest of the ones will stay intact. Intact means कि जो बाकी contract बचा, it is still able to the all the another clauses in itself can stand. Means those are not all other clauses are not against the laws. Only 2-3 clauses are against the laws. Means this basically applies the principle of severability. Can you sever? Sever is to cut. Sever means to cut. Can you cut the unlawful part from the lawful part? If you can cut the, it's like to if like there is a just to give a very visual appearance to, if this is a contract, if you can this part is unlawful, and this is lawful. If you can cut the unlawful part and still this whole lawful thing makes sense according to law, this basically means this whole lawful part is enforceable in law, then this whole can become a contract, and this unlawful part will be declared to be void. That is the whole concept. So it's not a very important part, but just to give you certain perspective on that is like agreement void if consideration object unlawful in part. But 24 may there's certain kind of if any part of consideration or object is unlawful in a contract, the entire agreement is void unless the unlawful part can be separated from the lawful part. But what happens is that if in this scenario this lawful part will not survive if this unlawful part is deleted, probably this is basically the task of court to interpret all of this. But to give you an understanding, if the major substance of the whole contract is in the unlawful part, and if you separate the lawful part from the unlawful part, then this whole contract will be a nullity. This is not making any sense. Then the entire agreement will be turned to be void. Okay, to it's like the important doctrine is severability doctrine if you want, when analyzing a contract containing both unlawful and lawful part. So inseverable is if unlawful objective or cannot be separated, the entire contract is void. Okay, to give a these are certain case laws on this topic. If you want to go understand about this, you can refer to these cases. You can refer to these cases. If you see, if I just want to give you one example of the case, the first example, the another one of this and this you can read back, go back and read on this and comment me if you have any doubt on this. Um, let's move. Give you example of first part. There is a toll tax collection. Toll tax collection. This is an example. The facts of the case. I'm not properly discussing about the facts of the case. To give an example, if this is a toll tax, if you understand this road has been constructed by a private entity, and because this road is the government infrastructure, but the private entity is now charging certain amount of fees. Private entity and the government has a contract in which private entity can now charge the toll tax, but private entity has in the taxation in its taxation has included certain charges which this whole private entity was not allowed to collect, but in the whole but there now the private entity is charging it from the pilgrims, the travelers who are traveling on this road. But in the contract in their contract, because they are following now a standard form of contract, you get one receipt when you give the toll tax, when you go to a court, when you're traveling through a road, if you have observed. This is a standard form of contract between the receipt, because you get a receipt, there is no negotiation between the parties. But in the standard form of contract, now there's certain kind of taxes which are included, which the toll tax authorities had no authority to charge. But still, if it's included, they were not able to separate the unlawful part from the lawful part, then this whole agreement was considered to be a void, because it has never become a contract. To understand, it's not a very important concept, but if you want to gain a perspective, this is basically talking about a severability doctrine. So that's all for this video, in which we have discussed about section 23, section 24 properly. We have discussed with examples. I hope you like this video. In the next topic, in the next series of lectures, we'll again take another important sections, and we will talk about all of these sections in very detail. If you like the video, please like the video, subscribe the channel, and please do comment to me in case you have any kind of query. Thanks a lot for listening, and happy learning.